What a time to be a boxing fan. With more 50-50 fights than Andy Ruiz Jr.'s had Snickers bars, this is After the Bell, Mirror Fighting's new boxing show in association with Betfair.
Haye is the WBA heavyweight champion of the world!
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
The Mirror brings you After the Bell in association with Betfair.
Welcome to this week's edition of After the Bell. Bumper panel here this week. Declan Taylor has climbed out of his sick bed to be with us. We have former super middleweight world champion George Groves, former cruiserweight and heavyweight world champion David Haye. A lot to talk about, so we will get straight into it. On Saturday night, Lewis Ritson won in Newcastle against Robbie Davies Jr. All three judges in favour of the Newcastle fighter. George, a close fight, but a fair result.
Yeah, a fair result. I thought he just for many of the rounds he couldn't miss Ritson. You know, he was landing big heavy shots, and he'd put together those eye-catching combinations that sort of would always edge around in his favour. It was competitive the whole way through, and Davies Jr. You know, he boxed really well. But I think a fair result, about right on the scorecards as well. Ritson in his hometown, a massive win for him, and you know, massive opportunities now lie ahead.
Declan, obviously, Davies Jr. was the more seasoned at that weight, had the size advantage, but Ritson just better on the night.
Yeah, he didn't really look bigger than him, though, did he, on the night, really? If anything, Ritson looked like he was a more hurtful puncher in there, and I agree with George, obviously a fair result. I thought maybe a little bit harsh on Davis, the scorecards, possibly, but, you know, I had it 7-5 personally for Ritson. And it's one of those fights where, because everyone's eyes were on it, and you know, it's not a massive, really deep division, that victory there is massive for them, and then they can go on to something special next, hopefully. Yeah,
David, obviously home crowd in Newcastle always plays to his advantage, and really after his defeat last year in the European title fight, it's sort of a bit of redemption for him.
Yeah, if you're going to have that big fight in your hometown, that's the type of way you want to do it, in a complete barnstormer, because you can guarantee every single fan of his who's in that arena is going to want to be there when he fights for that world title. You know, can you imagine if Josh Taylor, you know, beats Prograis, and we have that, you know, that massive super fight that people are hoping for up north? It could really that could be his huge homecoming fight for a world title, and you know, the future looks bright in that division.
We'll talk about what's next for Lewis Ritson in a moment, but on Friday night there was a unification clash in the light heavyweight division. Artur Beterbiev beat Alexander Gvozdyk, 10th round stoppage, a fight that wasn't shown in the UK on its traditional channels, but nevertheless another good fight, Declan. And any doubt now that Beterbiev is the best light heavyweight?
I think he's number one. I think that was the way to prove it. Yeah, it's a shame it wasn't on in the UK. I think people need to make a bit of noise about that, because we're getting like YouTube fighters on, you know, on pay-per-view, and missing big fights like that. It's not ideal, but yeah, I think Beterbiev is number one in the division. I mean, style-wise, he's not particularly pleasing on the eye. You know, he's quite, I wouldn't want to say he's a plodder, but you know, he's one pace, he's got one thing that he's doing, but he's very good at it, and he obviously hits real hard. He's got that weird, like, George Foreman sort of power where he doesn't really seem to have any backlift, and he's really hurting people. And it's a good stoppage. I think he's the number one. I can't see anyone at the moment beating him. I think Canelo, if he beats Kovalev, will be an interesting fight, just because of the way he moves, and obviously he's very skillful, but could he put up with that power? I'm not so sure, but I can't see Bivol giving him any trouble, the WBA champion. So yeah, I think he's number one, and you know, he keeps winning like this. He gets into that sort of pound for pound reckoning, even though he's not, you know, style wise, skill wise, he's clearly not the best. But I mean, what a fighter, fearsome guy.
He's effective. That's what it is. He's not pleasant on the eye. You don't watch him and go, when I grow up, I want to fight just like him. No, he's just rock solid in every department. He's got a granite chin. He just keeps grinding forward, and he doesn't mind missing. He's not a pretty fighter in any sense, but he's just effective. I think Kovalev would have a good shot of outboxing him. He's quite crude with his attacks. He doesn't mind taking a shot, although his defense is a little underrated. But he just keeps marching forward. It's like the Terminator, non-stop, just grinding through, and that's where he seems to get his success. And obviously fighting another undefeated champion, as he did, unifying the belts. I think, yeah, there's an argument for him being number one, as he has the most belts. But I wouldn't clearly make him number one in the division yet. I'd like to see him in with Kovalev. Obviously, if Kovalev beats Canelo, so if Canelo does beat Kovalev, then that for me would be a massive super fight for Beterbiev. So it's interesting times in the light heavyweight division.
George, you watched the fight in Russian, but from what you can see, pictures-wise, again, is that what he's got a style, it's working at the moment, but what will it take for someone to come and to beat him?
Yeah, refreshing to watch it without any commentary leading you astray. I watched it, and for large portions of the bout, I felt like he was getting outboxed. It was periods where you sense that he's going to land something, and it wasn't necessarily always going to be a pretty shot. It was just that physicalness and the way the fight almost fizzled out with the 3 knockdown, causing the finish. As again, I couldn't really understand what was going on in the corner. I couldn't understand anything, any help that would have been going on from ringside. But I reckon there's a lot of prospects out there, maybe like a Joshua Buatsi or something, who might be a little bit inspired by that, because if you've got a bit of boxing ability about you, I mean, even if you were able to say that a career light middleweight / so Alvarez now might be in the mix at light heavyweight, it just goes to show that a bit of boxing ability might beat these big, strong, crude guys. So it's not a foregone conclusion, I suppose, as you say, who is the number one in the division. There's guys there to be outboxed, and we're going to have a look at some of the names that are in on the sheet. There's a few out there to put question marks against.
Of course, Callum Johnson put down Beterbiev when they fought, so he is there potentially to be got at. Next up, we'll take a look at what's next for Ritson and for Beterbiev. We're going to play Matchmaker now and look ahead to what's next for Lewis Ritson, of course, his victory over Robbie Davies Jr. Declan, the talk beforehand was, well, if Ritson won, that he may look to fight the winner of Josh Taylor Regis Prograis, which is coming up this weekend, St James's Park, Newcastle, 50,000. Stadium fights now becoming more and more frequent, but would you fancy Ritson's chances against either man?
Not at the moment. I've got to say, if the fight was made tomorrow, I wouldn't pick him against either of them. Those odds are pretty hefty against him for a reason. But I mean, what's he going to do? He can't. If he's winning fights and big, meaningful fights like Robbie Davies Jr., a big British clash like that, you'd think he can't. There's nowhere else for him to go. You can't just keep doing that. He's going to eventually have to step up. At the moment, I would say it's a bit too soon for him. Certainly, if they look to do it next, you'd have to favour the other guy massively. But if it's Taylor, it's like David said earlier, if it's Taylor, it makes a lot of sense to do it. And who knows, you could do St James's Park. If it's in the summer, why not? And he's someone who clearly thrives off that big crowd. He's got a great following up there. It's only going to get bigger. That's particularly something like Saturday is really going to start generating that buzz around him like it has with Josh Warrington in Leeds. So, yeah, why not? He's going to back himself to win as well, and he can punch hard, so he's going to have a chance.
At some stage, you've got to make a move. As a fighter, you can't wait until you're the favourite before you take a fight over a champion. You're always, if you're fighting someone who's ranked number one in the world, you're always going to be outsider to beat him. So at some stage, you've got to make a calculation. It could go wrong, but am I going to get rewarded for my efforts? Do I genuinely believe I have a chance of winning? If the answer is no, you don't think you can win, and the money you're going to get isn't that good, I'd say wait until those elements change. But if he can sell the tickets, if it's a big fight and people genuinely want to see it, and he genuinely believes in his heart he can win the fight, I say take the fight. I say this is what it's about. You can't expect to be a great fighter without taking big sort of great chances. And this could be his opportunity to really stake his name as one of the best in the division from the Britain. So it's really exciting time for him and the division as a whole.
Do you think he'd be sitting there thinking that he'd fancy the winner of both of them, or do you think, as a fighter,
I don't know him personally. I can only go by my own. I remember being a 8 or 9 fight novice, watching the world champions and believing I'm better than them. Although I wasn't, I still looked at him. I was thinking, I could beat him. If I got the opportunity, I'd take it. And if he was like, I'm sure George is the same. When you look at such a champion, you're thinking, on my day, I can beat this guy. And if he's a real fighter, like he seems to be, the fact he went toe to toe, he put it all on the line. He didn't get overawed by the event. He won a clear fight. I think if there's ever a time for him to do it, it's now.
Might be speaking slightly out of turn and say I don't know Ritson that well either, but interesting comment I thought at the end of the fight, bearing in mind that he lost at European level only a few fights ago, and he was, he gave lots of praise to Robbie Davis Jr. Mentioned fighting the winner of Taylor Prograis and said, and it's a big money fight, and I've sort of set myself up, and it's like I would have been talking about the belts, about the accolade before the money at that stage. So that might just give away a little bit about his mind frame right now, where maybe he backs himself, but he's not sure. It's a massive jump from that level to the top world level fighting for unification belt. So he might need a couple more fights before he really tastes.
Where he believes it.
Yeah, where he really believes it. But it's hard. It's hard when you're he's still on the rebuild from that loss, and he might just be in that sort of that transitional period of will come back to backing himself, but at the same time getting over what might have been a few doubts or something, come back from a loss.
So Lewis Ritson is 3-1 with Betfair to beat Josh Taylor, 7-2 to beat Regis Prograis, Taylor and Prograis 1-4 and 1-5 respectively. I can understand obviously why Ritson wants that fight, or either fight, but Taylor, Prograis, whoever wins that is going to want the other two belts. There's not a lot in it for them at the moment. Apart from the money.
If they can fill a stadium, it gets to a point when you have, so let's say you've got two belts and the Ali Trophy. So he's got enough trinkets. So okay, I need to convert this. I need to buy my house outright. I need to secure my kids' future. I need to, I'm a world champion now. Let's do some business. And there's one thing sort of unifying the titles, but if there's an option to have a massive all British clash and generate a couple of million, or have a tough unification fight against someone in another country where you're getting a quarter of that, as a business, as a boxer only has so many fights in him. He needs to make sure not only is he getting the accolades from his achievements, but he's also securing his financial future at the same time. It's a fine balance. You can't always go for the dough, and you can't always go for the titles. You've got to kind of find a happy medium where you're achieving your goals, you're giving the fans what they want. I'm sure people would rather him fight, Ritson. So if just say Taylor wins, the British fans would much rather him fight, in Newcastle again in an all British affair for two belts than go and fight another one of the champions. Maybe the hardcore fans might want a unification fight, but the British fans who want a good all British dust up would rather see that.
George, obviously stadium fights were very rare, in fact almost non-existent, until you fought Carl Froch. Did you ever come close to fighting at Chelsea?
No, I think I realise is the better the team, the more precious they are about their pitch. You box at West Ham, but not that great, are they? And they allow you to get in there on the off season and mess up the pitch. But yeah, Stamford Bridge, I think they
Precious.
They entertain me like that. We feel good, but there was actually never any intention they'll ever let me and a bunch of boxing fans trample over the pitch, and rightly so. Rightly so.
Was it your fight? I remember Callis Howland talking about. I think it was after Eubank beat Yildirim, and he was talking about doing it at Fulham in January.
That was us. That was
your fight.
We were working hard on that.
But in January outside.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, does it? We do it in summer.
Not for you. How about
So
on the canopy.
I thought it made a lot of sense because Fulham, it's sort of it's my neck of the woods. But if they sell it to a load of Fulham fans who don't really like much Chelsea fans, they come out with a badge on the shorts. It might even the crowd a little bit, So we worked on that a little bit. The numbers, I think, made sense. We got pretty close. It was some friends who worked with me who had friends at Fulham that got close. But I think the World Series couldn't quite get it over the line. So so I think it might have been the $70 final. I can't remember. Either or Manchester worked and Saudi didn't.
So that's Lewis Ritson, perhaps St James's Park next year. Moving on to Artur Beterbiev. We've mentioned briefly now he's the unified champion, and obviously all eyes now on Sergei Kovalev, Canelo. But really, even if Kovalev loses, which I think he's favoured to do so, that fight with Beterbiev, they've got the amateur rivalry, that's still there.
Yeah, well, you got Kovalev. You know, it was only really recently he had the fight with Yard, and it seemed like a real quick turnaround. Yeah. It's like they had to squeeze this Yard fight in. I think they probably underestimated him a little bit, and he almost paid the price. And that was a real tough fight for him. And maybe he looked a little bit old. We don't know, you know. So that's why Alvarez must know something. Maybe we don't, and he fancies the fight, and he's in because he's going to give away so much size advantage, but he's still the favourite, you know. And if he wins, I can't really see him looking to take on any of the other big guys, because I'm assuming he sees something in Kovalev that he fancies. It's another belt, another prestigious thing to achieve, and but then he'll be rocketing back down the divisions like we did with the super middleweight. He fought Rocky Fielding and then back down to middleweight. The Golovkin fight's always going to be talked about for as long as either of them are fighting. I want to see that trilogy. So I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it'll be Alvarez, or maybe not even Kovalev. But them guys probably got to throw it. They're the ones that do have to fight each other, and it might be the champion Bivol who steps up early next year, summertime, in another unification.
So it looks like Beterbiev will probably face Fan Long Meng next. Is mandatory. I think they're looking about doing that in China. He's 25-1 on with Betfair to win that one, so that's largely a formality. Declan is, beyond that. Then you mentioned earlier, difficult to see him get beat by any of the sort of current. Well, certainly. Bivol.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick against him, but Kovalev would be an interesting fight because of the history. I think Canelo really. I think he'll go back down to probably super middleweight. That's where he'll settle. He beat Rocky Fielding for the regular belt. So I think he'll look to Callum Smith or someone out of Billy Joe maybe even and get one of the major titles at super middle. So then, Kovalev, they could still make the fight even if he loses. But if he loses badly, and maybe that's why the turnaround so quickly, because they obviously gave him a date. Golden Boy gave him this date and said you can either make it or we'll go somewhere else. So maybe he's cashing out, and if he loses badly to Canelo, which I'm not sure he will, then maybe there wouldn't be any legs in the Beterbiev fight. But I hope there is. And if he beats Canelo, that would be an amazing fight. Obviously a huge fight for Russia, but for world boxing, it'd be amazing.
He'll probably have to have a rematch. If he beats Canelo, I'm sure Canelo, being the money broker that he is, would have a rematch clause locked in there, neat and tidy. So if the unthinkable happens and Canelo somehow loses, then I'm pretty sure he'll have at least the right to have a rematch at some stage, because he is the guy who brings everything to the table other than the WBA light heavyweight belt. Yeah. Everything else he brings to the table. So I've always liked the Kovalev for Canelo fight. It's a crazy fight on paper. You look at it and you think one's 6'2", the other's like 5'9", 5'10". You're looking at it, you think, what makes it? I don't know what he sees. I don't know. But I remember Roy Jones Jr. when he went up to heavyweight, giving away 30 pounds or so to fight John Ruiz, and I remember thinking all it takes is just one punch from a heavyweight on against a light heavyweight, Roy Jones, and it'll be over. But they say a good big man beats a good little man, but a great little man 9 times out of 10 beats a good big man. And I think that this is where this comes into play. Kovalev isn't in his prime by any stretch, whereas Canelo is, and he's on a real good run, one of the best runs for many, many years. The champions that he's fought, the titles that he's picked up, if there's anybody who's on a winning run, it's him. So if he somehow manages to beat Kovalev, I don't believe the Batayev will be interested in fighting someone who's lost to a middleweight. So I think that will very much devalue that fight. It might be big in Russia, but outside of that, I think Batayev will look to fight Bivol or even Andy Yard. Do you think
Golden Boy would go anywhere near Beterbiev with Canelo?
I don't think so. Beterbiev, he just comes forward. He's too strong. He won't have a boxing match. Anyone who has a boxing match with Canelo probably going to lose. The only person who's been able to beat him was a prime, Floyd Mayweather. He's the only person who's been able to outbox him. But since then, it doesn't look like he's been in the ring with anyone who has the skills and know how to outbox him. And I think he's pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. Skill for skill, you put him and Lomachenko together. I think they're both evenly matched in terms of skill set. One's a big guy, one's a small guy. But anyone who boxes with Canelo, I think loses. But anyone who just walks through him and has no respect for his feints and his slickness, just gets in there and just smashes him up, real basic, like Turbiev likes to do, I think has a good shot. You know, he's a big, strong man who can just mow you down like he does against other legitimate light heavyweight champions. He could do the same to an effectively blown up middleweight.
One man's name, George, who keeps cropping up despite the fact that he's retired, is Andre Ward. Do you think there's anything in him sort of looking at the scene right now and thinking, you know what, I could come back for one night only?
He might be. I mean, if he keeps himself in good nick, which I'm sure he does, he's always in and around the boxing. He's fantastic at calling the fights. Superior boxing ability. You know, he beats probably all these guys on this list. So. But I think he just also likes being referred to and mentioned, and kind of likes the idea of people calling him to, call him out of retirement. I think if he hasn't come out already, I can't really see it anytime soon. I wouldn't stick my money on Ward at the moment. I think he's staying happily retired.
For interest's sake, Andre Ward 74 with Betfair to beat Beterbiev should he come back. Fancy any of that?
It's not a bad price. I'd have to see what Andre Ward looked like. I was convinced he was going away for a few years to bulk up and then he was going to come back as a heavyweight. I was sure he was going to do that. And I know they talked about Joshua, particularly Virgil Hunter, and they obviously fancied it for some reason. Now we see what happened with Andy Ruiz. You sort of start thinking, do you know what? Maybe Andre Ward.
Similar dimensions, not height-wise and arm length.
It's not that much difference.
Yeah.
So I was convinced.
Around the gut region.
Yeah, I was convinced that was going to happen. So I don't know. Like George says, he's still in great shape. It might just be because he's on TV every 2 weeks or whatever. But I don't know. 7-4 is not a bad price if he came back and he, in terms of that style, that Beterbiev style, Ward knows how to deal with that. He'd make it an ugly fight. He'd be able to nullify him, and who knows, he might nick it.
How long ago was his last fight against Kovalev? Was that 3 years?
Yeah, no, maybe not that long. A couple of years. Yeah. So it's not like he's not out of the question. Long, yeah. But
that fight perhaps for another day. Next up, we'll look ahead to this weekend and 2 cracking fights in London. So from one 50-50 fight last weekend to another in London this weekend, Josh Taylor against Regis Prograis for the unified super lightweight titles and the Muhammad Ali Trophy in the final of the World Boxing Super Series. George, you know Josh well, you trained together. Before we come to his technical abilities, what kind of person is he like in the gym?
He's a great person to have in the gym because he's just full of so much energy. If you're feeling a bit tired and you watch him and he does more shadow boxing, I think, before he's even put his hand wraps on than I did in my entire camp. Like he's just a ball of energy, which is great to be around. He's got all the attributes that you learn. Like if he was a trainer, you wanted something in a fighter, he's got it. He wants to have a fight. He's got that. He's got a lot of it. He's got the energy. He's got the desire. He's got the ambition. He's everything. He ticks every box. And it was great to have him around because while I was training there, he was still considered a prospect. I think he was the hottest prospect we had over here. But then since entering this tournament, with relatively only a dozen fights, he's now world champion and he's on the verge of he's challenging for another belt. So he's come an awful long way in a real short space of time. But and improved, I think, very much improved fight on fight. It's great to see. A
tough route as well. He hasn't been fed gimmies his whole career, is he? He's always stepped up, even sort of at domestic level. Harry Davis, when everyone was trying to swerve him, he was willing to get in there and do it. And he put on. Every time he's had an obstacle in front of him that's supposed to test him, he's always passed with flying colours. And I was fortunate enough to work in the gym when Shane McGowan was training me, seeing how motivated and how switched on he is. And there's a reason why he doesn't gas out in fights, because as you said, he's just non-stop. He's like a ball of energy, just constant. The energy you see in the ring fighting is the same intensity he puts in sparring or on the bag or when he's skipping. Whatever he's doing, he's giving it 100%. And I've always said, I'm not just jumping on the bandwagon now, I've said from the first time I saw him, you can see when someone's got it. They've either got it or they haven't. And I was like, he's definitely got that star, world class sort of character about him.
Out of interest, I know obviously you probably trained at different times, but is there in a boxing gym with so many different levels, ages. Is there a hierarchy? Is it like a, do you take on certain personas, or is it just...
Yeah, I suppose lots of times the hierarchy comes with who's got the next fight. So, if this week Josh Taylor's the man in the gym, because he's got his fight looming, and then once his fight's gone, there might be another world champion. At the moment, Shane's only got one world champion, but at the time when he had me, Haye, Frampton, Taylor, loads of great fighters in the gym all at once. And rather than having one person, you have to get in early, say, well, I'll have the 10 o'clock slot. That suits me well, I'll get enough time to I'll get my coffee and get in. But yeah, I think no one's nose was put out of joint, really, maybe. But some people left miserable. Who knows? Maybe it's because they weren't world champion no more, and new world champions came through the gym. But I think other than that, Shane's got a great dynamic in his gym at the moment, and happy fighters work for good fighters, better fighters, and Taylor's in a great place. I mean, he has took the tough fights in the quick route, which I think you kind of have to do now in modern boxing. You never see these guys who fight in journeyman in their third fight, and then they're fighting the same journeyman in their 15th fight. There's no such thing as a journeyman. You have a couple of fights, and then before you hit double figure fights, you should be challenging for domestic titles within 4 years of being a professional. I think that's the right time to be fighting for or be on the cusp of fighting for world titles. Taylor sort of followed that route. Fortunate enough to go in this tournament and have the fights there for him. He hasn't had to tread water as a mandatory weight time and time again, see people jump in front of him. He's going to finish this tournament. He had to wait a long time for the tournament to finish. They've finally come up with a finish date, but if he gets past Prograis, or same thing for Prograis, if he comes through this fight as the winner, he's a unified world champion in the space of 12 months, and that's just amazing.
Declan, of course, Josh Taylor, a big star in Scotland. This is now a chance to sort of break out more into, UK certainly, and presumably beyond.
Yeah, well, they'll be watching this very closely in America, because Prograis is a big, I say big star, but he's an emerging star, and it's almost like they're both world champions, both undefeated, but actually they've both got an awful lot to prove. They're trying to establish themselves as that next level sort of star. They're obviously both very good, but Prograis is very, very tough fight. Obviously another southpaw. He's already beaten Terry Flanagan, another southpaw, in the quarterfinals of the series. And he said an interesting thing, that this is the sort of fight that wouldn't have happened without the tournament, because two undefeated world champions, they would often get kept apart, but we're getting it. Much like what happened with you in the Super Series, it's exactly the same thing. So it's great to see that we're finally getting, it's amazing that it's on these shores as well. There was some worry that Prograis was going to pull out. I don't know what that says about his character. If he says it was nothing to do with him, I'm sure, I totally believe it. Great fight, a little bit shorter than Taylor. Actually similar to you boys in the way that he carries that front hand quite low, and then looks to set up a big power shot at the backhand. Will he be able to do it against someone that little bit taller and a little bit longer, and that textbook style that Josh Taylor's got? Who knows? Maybe Taylor can outwork him and outbox him actually. But we did see against Baranchik, he can get dragged into a fight. I know he's trying to put on a show for the fans, but he could have made that easier work, I think, against Baranchik. So if that happens against Prograis, then it's going to be a great spectacle for the fans. But harder night for him.
Just on that, George, like Josh, I think a couple of times after his fight, he said, I got caught too much, but it's because I was trying to, please the fans. Is that right, or did he just get caught too much?
He's a perfectionist, so your harshest critic is yourself straight after the fight before you've had a chance to go back and watch it. And he's definitely got that bit about him where he likes to have a bit of a fight. He'll throw caution to the wind and let his hands go maybe in slightly dangerous positions, and then even if he's in full control, then you're leveling the playing field, making it more and more of a 50-50 fight, which is never a great idea. But he's I think it's definitely a change in his mind frame that I've noticed through knowing him, that the fights are bigger. You are to take them more seriously and stick to the game plan more. As such, if that be the case. No doubt he will get caught with a few shots in this fight, as they both will. But it'll be a lot of skill on show. There will definitely be an awful lot of skill on show. It might be one. We had Campbell Lomachenko, and I was campaigning before that fight that people need to see this fight just because of the amount of skill that's going to be on show in this main event. And I think there's going to be a lot of skill in the Taylor Prograis fight. They're the finalists of the World Series. There's been a lot of good fighters in in that mix, and they've got to the final. It's a fascinating fight, and it just shows you how good Prograis is to come through as a favourite away from home in a tournament that it felt like it was taking forever to finally get a date, and now they've got a date. So both boys would have been in camp for an awful long time, not knowing when the final date was, had to stay in shape. But they're just both itching now just to get in there and get the job done.
As Josh says, Prograis is a favourite with Betfair at 4-6. Josh Taylor 11-8. The draw always a possibility 20-1. David, how do you see it going?
I think when you get two undefeated fighters, who are current champions, you always get something special. And whether they're undefeated or not, the fact that they both believe they're the best in the world, and they both have a strap around their waist, and they're both willing and wanting to fight each other. I've watched the face-off they had, the round table talk, and there was no stepping back. They both were 100%, but they would both bet their life that they'd win the fight. Whenever you get that, you're going to get fireworks. I know Josh Taylor is an amazing long-range fighter, but I think his close-up boxing isn't recognised. The short, this left uppercut to the body, I've seen him inspiring. There's been very few people who haven't at some stage been winded by him. I think it's some people are worried about his long-range stuff, but when people try and force the pace and get into his range, they end up getting hit with this sneaky left uppercut to the solar plexus that he throws through, and that I think, the fact he can do both, he's a long range and close range, is hard. It's just very, very difficult to beat him. But if there is somebody in the division who has a chance, it's Prograis. But I haven't seen nowhere near as much as Prograis as I've seen Taylor. But what I've seen of Taylor, it's been flawless. I haven't said he can't take a shot. Yes, he can take a shot. He's got knockout power. He's the full package. He really is the full package. And personally, I'd never bet against him in a fight after seeing him in the gym and in the ring. I've seen a lot of his fights live, and he's the real deal. I haven't seen. I've heard the same thing said about Prograis from some Americans. They've told me the same thing, and I'm like, that's why this fight's so intriguing. That's why it looks so close on paper, because there's a very strong and legitimate argument for why both fighters should win the fight. And, us as boxing fans can sit back and really, really enjoy it.
Declan, you fancy the split decision?
Yeah, I always think a fight like this, a split is great value, because you can see it, can't you? You can see it being very close, nip and tuck, and then the scorecards are mad most of the time. So who's to say? And Taylor 6-1. It just means you get a boost of a bit of value there. 6-1 Taylor to win a split is an amazing price. Same with Prograis, 5, slightly less at 5-1. I always think there's good value in those split decision bets. And if you think like me, it's going to be a close fight, that's going to go the distance. So there's always going to be value in that split.
Where are the judges from? Do we know who's
It'll
scoring
be,
it? If there's an American judge and a British judge, the split decision that's rule.
Yeah.
A split decision either way. If it's 6-1.
Yeah, it will be neutral. It will be it won't all be British judges.
Okay.
So because they're going to favour Prograis style. One guy's going to favour that. One guy's going to favour Taylor. So 6-1 seems like a good price.
Yeah.
Final prediction from you, George?
Yeah, I want to go with Taylor. I watched his final spar this week down in Kent, and he looks in great shape. When the fights, as I say, the fight's getting bigger. He's in the final now, so unification is the occasion going to get to him. It hasn't. I think both fighters they've done the media obligations that you have to face off instances, and they're both looking for weakness, and I haven't really seen a weakness in either. I think both are supremely confident, and they were both fishing. Taylor especially, he was fishing. He was trying to get under. They're trying to get under each other's skin, I think, as David says, he's a phenomenal fighter. I've seen an awful lot more in him than I have Prograis, obviously, and I can't bet against him either. I think this would be his time. He's got home advantage. I think that's a fantastic thing to have. It'll be interesting because the World Boxing Series do have a fourth judge, and so if it works out a draw, the fourth judge just basically picks who goes through, and
The British, I don't know.
It doesn't affect the actual decision on your box rec. Say it'll still be a draw, it's just they pick whoever they want to go through.
So there is a genuine winner.
Fighter. You never know. But, it'd be interesting because it's just
Does that affect the odds though? If you bet on it,
No, because you'd still get paid out on the 20-1 draw.
the actual decision, but not of the Super Series decision.
Exactly. So
if it's a draw, you'd get paid for a draw.
Yeah,
so
and then the fourth
three judges draw. Okay,
Yeah.
just getting that right.
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
Yeah.
That definitely adds something else to it. We haven't seen that yet, though, have we? Or have they called in the fourth
I don't
judge?
know if there's been a draw yet
No.
where like, they've had to go in favour of the fourth judge. But like I won a unanimous against Chris Eubank Jr., but the fourth judge gave it to Chris Eubank Jr.
Okay.
Again, he must have been cheaper.
Well, just before Josh Taylor and Regis Prograis on Saturday, we have another thrilling fight. Dereck Chisora against David Price. Of course, Dereck Chisora initially due to fight Joseph Parker before he pulled out with a spider bite. David, you're in as good a position as anyone to talk about Dereck. Obviously, you're his manager. When Parker pulled out, where was David Price on the list of alternative opponents?
He was right. He was right up there. You know, when you're geared up to fight someone who's well respected and is a former heavyweight champion, someone who holds a victory over Andy Ruiz Jr., who's the unified champion currently. You've got to mentally gear up, and Dereck fortunately, whipped himself up into tremendous shape. As soon as I heard of the spider bite, I actually left it a little while before I told him, because there's a few hard sessions we had planned that I wanted him to get through, with Joseph Parker in mind, as we didn't have an opponent locked in. I didn't want to say to him, "Are you not fighting Parker?" He says, "Who am I fighting?" I go, "I don't know." Then if there's ever a time for a fighter to take his foot off the pedal, that's when it would be. So, I talked to Eddie Hearn about potential opponents, and David Price's name kept coming up. He's somebody who's coming off a nice winning streak. His last fight against Dave Allen, he looked great, and the Sky pay-per-view fans know him. They've seen him from the start, so it was an obvious fight. David Price brings a lot of danger. He's 6'9", I think. I've sparred with him many rounds. I know how heavy-handed he is.
Haymaker fight, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
I signed him out of the amateurs, so I did that for a reason, because I believed at one stage he could be heavyweight champion of the world. And it didn't work out that way for him. But now he's got this second wave in his career where he's taking things seriously now, and he looked as good as he's ever looked in his last fight. He's always shown glimpses of what it takes to get to the very top. When he fought Alexander Povetkin, he nearly knocked him out with, I think, a big left hook. He really cracked him one, and I thought that was his chance to beat that big name, to give him that shot. It all fell apart. But we can't rely on that. We can't rely on David Price falling apart. So Dereck Chisora, fortunately, I think he sparred with David Price before, and he felt David Price's power and realizes, it's hard to get past that long jab. He's got such a piston-like jab, and they don't look hard on TV, but I've ate a few of them, and he's a very heavy-handed man. And to beat him, you got to come through some issues, some problems. And unfortunately, Dereck's in the mindset where he realizes he might have to weather an early storm to keep that educated pressure, that grinding him down mindset going into this fight. So I think it's going to be very, very explosive early, but I just see Dereck Chisora's physicality being the key to really being able to smother David Price. He's so big, he's so strong. He's been lifting weights, he's been eating good, he's been paying the price in training. And Dereck Chisora, you get one or two guys, if you saw his fight against Say Nagashi, very underwhelming against the southpaw. Everyone said that's why it was against the southpaw. We didn't really go for it. But then his next fight was Artur Spilka, who's also a southpaw, but who went 9 rounds with Deontay Wilder, caused Wilder some problems. And all of a sudden he switches on and takes away in 2 rounds and looks better than he's ever looked. It's a situation where it's all in his mind, it's all in his head. If he's up for a fight, if he knows he's going to need to win this fight, and he knows there's danger, He rises to the occasion. When there's no danger, he takes his foot off the pedal. Fortunately, he sees danger in David Price as he sparred him before, and everybody who he's talked to about David Price say he could really punch that right uppercut. I've walked onto one. I think it was 2005. I remember I sparred with him. He was an amateur and he hit me with an uppercut. After I sparred with him, it's always been quite comfortable sparring, and I walked onto an uppercut from him. I remember thinking I buckled my legs. I remember thinking this guy can really hit. He was only skinny back then as well. As a young guy, he was really skinny, but now he's a 35-year-old man. You know, he's as strong as he's ever going to be right now. So that punch power is going to always be very, very dangerous.
Dereck hasn't had a trainer since splitting with Dave Caldwell. So what's going to happen on the night? I know he told a few of us last week.
He's going to somehow learn to put the Vaseline on his face with his gloves on, and
we're not going to see you jump in there.
No, I won't be in this corner. But there'll be someone will be there.
There'll be someone there. He won't just be sat there on his own. There'll be someone there. You know, whether he'll say anything or not, we'll see. But Dereck knows what he needs to do. He's been here, done it. This will be his 40th professional boxing match. He's fought for world titles. He's the only title he hasn't won is a world title, European, British, Commonwealth. He's done it all, and he really wants a world title belt. You know, it will be one of the biggest shocks if he somehow just manages to get a world title fight, let alone win a world title fight. But look at him in the gym, seeing him sparring, seeing how he's able to whip his body up into such tremendous shape and been able to maintain the pace. He's setting a pace now in sparring that up until this point he hasn't done before. You know, the last spar I watched, his last spar, was so much better than anything he's done, even before the Dylan White rematch. It's just completely night and day. You know, the pace that he set, the intensity, the head movement, everything's just so much better now than it was then. So if he was impressed with his performance against Dylan White, you know, a year ago, you're going to be very impressed with what he does on Saturday night.
Obviously, as we mentioned, George, David Price's physical attributes, you can see that by looking at him, but mentally, that seems to always have been his issue.
Yeah, I mean, he's a phenomenal puncher, probably one of the hardest punchers in the division. But yeah, he unravels really quickly. Maybe part fatigue, but we've seen him before in the past where it felt like he'd had mental sort of you get consumed by the occasion. I remember noticing it first. I thought in the Tony Thompson fight where he seemed like he was in full control, and then was like had an anxiety attack in the ring, and ended up losing and getting stopped. He's got that vulnerability. You know, if he gets hit on the chin, he's gone many times, and I don't know whether that plays in the back of his mind as well. But Chisora has to just stick with him on the work rate and just make sure he don't walk into anything big. Price will be, I'd imagine, trying to keep the double distance. He wants to keep it as long as possible, keep Chisora away from him. He's got the height and reach over him, and then as soon as Chisora starts to slow up or steady into the fight, then he can start to look to nail him with the big shots. Big straight hand is what David Price does well. I think he'll be coming in on a high off his last win. I think he generally is starting to back himself, you know, and it's not just words. He does believe that he can go on and do big things in the sport. He'll be, I think he'll be excited by this Chisora challenge because he took it at relatively short notice as such. Not that it makes that much difference in the heavyweights. He was preparing for a fight, I think in November in Liverpool, but he stepped in his big occasion pay-per-view fight, and a win for him would definitely lead to big opportunities. So there's a lot riding on this fight.
Yeah, Dereck Chisora is the odds-on favourite 2-7 with Betfair. David Price 3-1. Declan, anything you like?
So I just noticed the price by decision is 14-1. I know obviously that is very, very unlikely, but that's a massive price. And if you just think about dimension-wise, that is the way that David Price could win this fight, is by trying to outbox Dereck, keep him on the end of the jab, obviously keep him honest by trying to land the right hand. And we know Dereck is very, very durable. I mean, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise, and 14-1 seems staggering, but there's a reason why that's big. But I mean, if you just fancy a few quid, put it this way, don't back the draw. But that 14-1 just standing out for obviously that you would think it's going to finish inside the distance, but that's an amazing price, 14-1.
He's hard to nail, isn't he, Chisora? I mean, you
He's
got rid of
getting-
him in your fight, but you had to hit him with a good old flurry of punches to get rid of him. And even then, he didn't look like he was going to stay down. He's been in distance with Klitschko with so many other big punches, and he's definitely got a knack. He can go into sort of just try and get through the rounds mode. He can switch off at times, can't he? Chisora, that's your job to keep him switched on. But again, that all can lead towards price points.
The times when Dereck has been stopped, if you're going back recently, when he got stopped against Dillian Whyte, he was exhausted. So was Dillian Whyte. They were both both the tanks were empty, and they were both fighting on empty. How long can David Price fight on empty? That's the question. We haven't seen him in many rounds where he's completely exhausted fighting. It's he tucks up, takes shots, the referee stops it. So his best, in my opinion, Price's best shot is to try and take Dereck Chisora out while he's fresh. You can't rely on his punch power in round 8, 9, 10, 11 to be there like it is in 1, 2, 3, and 4. So Derek's aware he needs to be switched on from that first bell, and he needs to drag David Price into a dogfight as quickly as possible.
Well, difficult to see a bad fight on Saturday night. Of course, we'll be back next week to look back at the action, and then, of course, ahead to what's next for Chisora, Price, Taylor, and Prograis. You can watch us across social media and on Mirror Fighting. Thanks for watching.